Mesdames et Messieurs, Excellences, comme je l'ai dit hier, l'UNESCO fait face à une situation difficile. Je dirais, nous sommes dans un tournant de notre histoire. Depuis une semaine, hier et encore ce matin, j'ai mené des consultations avec l'ensemble des groupes pour vous alerter sur nos problèmes et y répondre de façon collective. Je vais aller plus loin. Je dirais que c'est un test pour notre organisation. Un test de courage, un test de volonté politique, un test pour les réformes et même un test de sang-froid. L'adoption du budget tel que proposé est une première décision positive et courageuse. Il est le résultat d'un équilibre fragile d'un long processus de consultation. Nous avons maintenant un document de référence qui va être notre boussole pour les 2 prochaines années. Nous savons que ce sera difficile, mais la situation peut évoluer au cours du biennum. Et nous allons tout mettre en œuvre pour relever ce défi. Et je passe maintenant à notre problème le plus immédiat. Avant la fin du mois de décembre, nous devons faire face à un déficit de trésorerie de 65 millions de dollars. Ce déficit correspond à la somme restant à verser par les États-Unis au titre de l'année 2011. Nous savons que les États-Unis ont l'habitude de payer leurs contributions à la fin de l'année pour des raisons liées à leur calendrier budgétaire. Et cette somme, comme je l'ai dit hier, nous ne la percevrons pas. C'est donc un problème que nous devons régler tout de suite. Nous avons 6 semaines devant nous et c'est un temps, période très courte. Ça signifie que nous devons prendre des mesures radicales et que nous devons les prendre rapidement. J'ai parfaitement conscience de la difficulté de réfléchir à cette question dans les délais aussi courts. Je mesure également les obligations administratives, financières, juridiques à respecter avant de pouvoir verser des sommes. Elles sont légitimes, toutes ces considérations, elles sont normales. Je ne demande aucune mesure d'exception. Mais je vous demande de prendre la mesure de la situation et de contribuer comme vous pouvez. Depuis une semaine, l'équipe de direction passe déjà en revue toutes nos activités prévues pour novembre et décembre afin de dégager des économies et combler le déficit prévu. J'ai interrompu temporairement certaines activités pour reviser leurs coûts. L'UNESCO tourne maintenant au ralenti. Notre urgence est d'examiner l'ensemble des programmes dans tous les secteurs, y compris les engagements contractuels, les voyages de personnel, les publications, les coûts de communication, les réunions et le reste, pour couper, reporter, suspendre, interrompre. Avec toutes ces mesures, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous estimons dégager une économie de 35 millions de dollars. J'aurai des chiffres plus précis avec une ventilation détaillée dès la semaine prochaine. Nous regardons également du côté de notre fonds de roulement, the Working Capital Fund, qui s'élève actuellement à 30 millions de dollars. Il représente 4,5% de notre budget total. Il nous laisse de 3 à 4 semaines d'autonomie. C'est un niveau très bas comparé à d'autres organisations du système qui se situent plutôt autour de 10 à 12%. L'intégralité de cette somme, 30 millions de dollars, sera également injectée pour combler le déficit. Avec les 35 millions d'économies, j'espère bien réalisées jusqu'à fin de cette année, et les 30 millions du fonds de roulement, de Working Capital Fund, nous espérons pouvoir combler notre déficit le plus immédiat de 65 millions de dollars en 2011. Mais cela signifie que nous finirons l'année sans aucune réserve, dans une situation dangereuse. Cette situation est d'autant plus dangereuse que nous allons devoir faire face, à partir du 1er janvier, à un autre problème. Au 1er janvier 2012, nous aurons un déficit de 143 millions de dollars qui correspond à une perte de contribution de 22% du budget que nous venons d'adopter. Et à ce moment-là, nous n'aurons plus aucun fonds de roulement. I'm speaking about the Working Capital Fund. Il sera à zéro. Nous allons devoir prendre des mesures radicales. Ces mesures, nous allons devoir y réfléchir soigneusement. On ne peut pas couper 22% de façon transversale dans l'ensemble des activités. Il va falloir faire des choix, et parfois des choix difficiles. Et chacun devra prendre ses responsabilités. J'affirme solennellement que je prendrai les miennes au nom de l'intérêt supérieur de l'UNESCO. Je voudrais remercier tous les États membres qui souhaitent me donner des marges de manœuvre supplémentaires dans les mouvements de fonds entre les secteurs et à l'intérieur des secteurs, et qui avaient lancé hier un appel d'éviter de tomber dans la microgestion. J'aurai besoin de cette souplesse. Mais je sais très bien que cette situation est aussi une opportunité d'accélérer la réforme. Je suis totalement prête à réviser l'ensemble de notre action, nos modalités de fonctionnement, nos structures au sein du secrétariat. Je sais très bien que nous pouvons réduire encore nos frais administratifs, prioriser nos activités et mieux répondre aux attentes des États membres. Nous devons et nous allons, j'espère bien, le faire ensemble. Dans ce moment difficile, j'en appelle au consensus, car nous avons plus que jamais besoin d'unité pour faire face à la situation. Nous venons, par exemple, d'adopter un plan d'action complet avec 87 mesures précises suite au travail du groupe respectif basé du Conseil exécutif précédent, basé sur le rapport de l'évaluation externe. Mais nous allons faire beaucoup plus. Dans l'immédiat, nous avons besoin d'un signal fort de la part de tous les États membres pour régler notre problème de déficit. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have been discussing yesterday and today, I seek your support to proposals that will help UNESCO move through this time of serious difficulty. Reflecting these discussions, I have circulated a new amendment to the document we discussed yesterday. Please allow me to take this opportunity to be very clear about each of these proposals that I dealt with briefly yesterday. The first proposal is to defer the payment of the current incentive scheme to member states. En français, c'est le système d'incitation au paiement des contributions. For consideration at the 37th session of the General Conference. Just for your information, to be very clear about what we are talking in concrete terms, this is currently forecasted between 1 to 3 million, depending on currency fluctuations. I would strongly appeal to all member states to support this, I would say, modest decision that we can take now, and I appeal to a consensus on this modest decision that will send a very strong political signal about the unity and about the engagement of member states to support the organization in these difficult times. The proposal I'm making to you does not require any additional contribution of member states at this particular moment. My modest proposal to you is to discuss this issue, not to take action on this issue during 2012, but to discuss this during our next General Conference in the year 2013. I believe that this simple and modest decision, which I would ask you to rally the support and the consensus of you, will be a very strong signal, political signal, to the unity of member states in their wish to support the organization in these difficult times. The second, and probably most important measure, would be, as an immediate urgent solution, to secure a temporary increase of our working capital fund for the year 2012-2013. As I mentioned previously in the French part of my intervention, our working capital fund is to the level of 4.5% of our budgetary contributions. It's much lower than practically most, if not all, the other organizations in the system. The usual recommendation is that we have it at the level of 12%. Others have it at the level of 10, between 10 and 12%. I know it's a complicated issue that you might have to deal with your parliaments and with a complex procedure, parliamentary and administrative procedure. Still, I do believe that this working capital fund be increased until 10% of the global budget ceiling. As I said, I understood and I listened, I heard your message that you expressed yesterday and today during the numerous consultations that I had with very many of the member states. The discussion for me was quite, I would say, revealing and quite instructive. I'm keenly aware of the difficulties of many governments that they face today against the backdrop of the economic and financial crisis. In the circumstances, I appeal to member states to make voluntary advances, those of member states who can afford to make voluntary advances to complement the working capital fund for a period of 2 years that could be renewed at the next General Conference in accordance with the financial situation of the organization at that time. Let me, ladies and gentlemen, be perfectly clear. Member states are invited to make an entirely voluntary contribution to the working capital fund to the extent they consider it possible. And as long as the working capital fund is yours, it's not the usual contributions to the budget of this organization, these advances will be refunded to the member states concerned by deduction from their assessed contribution at the time of the repayment. Given the short notice, I believe it necessary to request the General Conference to delegate authority to the Executive Board to examine and, if appropriate, decide upon this question at the 189th session of a new level of working capital fund to be supplemented entirely by voluntary contributions. And let me mention something which emerged during our consultations in the different regional groups and also in all the other discussions that we held today. The Working Capital Fund, as I mentioned, these are contributions, assessed contributions by member states to cushion certain risks in our organization. These are your money. The 30 million of the Working Capital Fund that we will use by the end of this year to fill the hole, we hope that in the future will be replenished once the funds, regular funds to this organization start to come back. When we speak about using this Working Capital Fund this year and using the savings by the end of this year, it means that by that we will fill the cash flow hole that we have nowadays in the budget. The new voluntary contributions eventually that will come to this Working Capital Fund will be kind of a loan that your governments will give to the organization in order to fill this time of risk. But this will be given back to you if the General Conference, whatever the future General Conferences decide, or if the General Conference decides otherwise. I think this is extremely important for you to understand that when I ask you to make voluntary contributions to the Working Capital Fund, this is neither an extra budgetary trust fund nor some kind of other contribution to the regular budget. This is a voluntary contribution to a working fund that stays here at the organization, and it stays with you. In the future, the General Conference may decide on what the ceiling of this Working Capital Fund may be for the future spending of the organization. But as long as we have to deal with an imminent problem nowadays, I strongly appeal to those member states who consider they're in a position to contribute to the Working Capital Fund to do that because it will be of enormous help for the organization. And once again, as I said it yesterday, I know this is not a long-term solution, nor is it a substitute to the loss of the 25% of our budget. However, this will provide us with some breathing space to plan rationally within the new circumstances and the new conditions of how we have to deal with today. And let me also say that the time and the space is vital today. I believe this will be absolutely essential on the 1st January 2012, when we will have to deal with the zero working capital at this organization and with a spend of all our savings and other resources. I believe also that the idea that emerged during the consultations yesterday and today with many member states that a working group be established for member states which will be open to everybody under the presidency of the General Conference, and of course with my personal contribution, is an extremely valuable one. Because I do believe that the financial stability of the organization is a problem not only for me as a Director General, it's a problem that we all in this organization, and especially the member states, we have to deal with. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will appeal also for a strong consensus, a strong decision, consensus decision on this important point when we come up to the text. And the third, I wish to make an appeal to all governments to provide their assessed contributions as early as possible in the year 2012. Some governments, and I appreciate very much their statements, have already addressed their readiness to do so. And I will, of course, seek support of all member states in this respect. And last, as I mentioned yesterday, I would like once again to reiterate that I have decided to launch an emergency multi-donor fund for core priority programs and reform initiatives. This emergency fund will be open to all donors, from member states to public institutions, foundations, and individuals. I am pleased to inform you that since the 2nd of November, there has been an unprecedented outpouring of support for UNESCO. coming from individuals, associations, and private corporations from all corners of the globe. I see these expressions of support as clear recognition of the good that UNESCO does in the world. These are very concrete indicators of success. I am pleased that we launched today a new online donation tool that will make it easier for people to contribute. And I guess what we have now on the screen is the web page, also the indication of the launch of this special fund. Again, ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear. This is not simply another extra budgetary fund. It will be directed to supporting our core activities so that our core activities are not affected by the difficult financial situation. All these decisions are not decisions of choice. They are decisions of urgency. Unfortunately, I do not believe we have time to wait, or that these are decisions that we can postpone. If we take these measures now, this will give us time to consider the necessary longer-term policies we must take in a process of open and inclusive consultation. As I said yesterday, there is no single solution to resolve all of our current and predicted difficulties. We need to build a package of measures, some of which are already underway, others which must be taken very soon. This package must balance immediate imperatives with the programmatic implementation of our mandate. It must balance urgency with foresight. This is a time of unity, a time for all of us to pull together. Together, I am convinced we can overcome the difficulties we face. I use the word difficulties deliberately. I still do not believe this is a crisis. This is a new situation, and I would like us not to compare this to the crisis the organization lived through in the past. The conditions, the starting point, and the modalities are not the same. We must rally, first and foremost, around our values. In this time of difficulty, we need to find the consensus as we move forward. And if you allow me, there is a classical Latin wisdom which says, festina lente, make haste slowly. I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to be deliberate, but we should also be very decisive. We have to act now. I would propose tomorrow to the first meeting of the new Executive Board to convene a meeting of the new Executive Board earlier than we normally do it. I believe that the urgency of the situation compels us that we do not lag behind the time and we discuss the financial situation of the organization along line with the other items on the agenda, and that we convene not later than end of February and beginning of March. I believe we will have to take important decisions, and I would like also to have the Executive Board as a partner so that I can share and report to the Executive Board about all the decisions that I would have taken by that time on the cost savings of the different programs and savings in the administrative expenditures of this organization.